Okay, now I'm going to mix up some HT110 dilution. I don't know what it is. I forgot what it is. I use 30 milliliters to 1 liter to make 1 liter of working solution of water. Mix it with water, and that's my general dilution. I use less. I used to use less when I masked for transparencies to keep the grain fine, very, very fine. Less than half of that. I think, less than 13 milliliters to make 1 liter of working solution when I was masking transparencies. And negs, you can do the same thing if you want a very subtle mask. The mask that I'm doing now, today, is actually, well, they're kind of, in a way, they're extreme examples because I want to show you how masking can change a photograph more drastically than I normally do. As of the last year and a half, 2 years, I've gotten to really finesse masking, which is okay. So I don't know if you can see this, but I've got 20 milliliters of water here, and I just filled this graduate, left-handed here, with concentrate. I get up to 50. So I had 30 milliliters of concentrate. And you can do this if you have good graduates. And then I'll pour it in to about 750 milliliters of water at 72 degrees. And you have to rinse this at least 3 times to get the remaining concentrate out. And you see this, I learned this from Katine, shaking the graduate like that. Katine is a Bay Area photographer that is a technical wizard. For a time I studied making dye transfers with him, and taught me some good lab techniques, good lab habits, which I follow to this day. This was in the early 80s. Okay, so now I have my 3 baths, and I have to work in the dark now because I'm going to be using pan masking film, which is panchromatic, so no red light. And let's go to the dark room. I'll bring you with me. All right. Okay, so this is my contact frame with the pins in there. And we're going to work on, let's work on this one. This is the original neg that I shot last weekend, or maybe 2 weekends ago. I went out and shot 3 things, and I didn't like one of them. I mean, whoops, I'm bumping this camera here. Okay, so this goes down on the pins. Now, I take the dried first stage mass, and remember I made 3 of them. I'm going to put it on top. Let's do that. And I like to take it straight from the take it straight from the drying, so there's hopefully no dust at all that's landed on it. And as I successively lay each one down, you'll begin to see the density build up. So this is the third one. And what happens is the darkest areas of the image should be the darkest image you see here. But because it's a negative, it's you've got both a negative and a positive image here. The positive part of the image is the black area. That's the actual black in the print. The light area in this image now becomes also the dark area of the picture. But it's going to be the dark area of the picture that's going to be lightened by the mask. And the darkest areas of the image that is not black are these leaves, which I don't want to record on the mask. What I want the mask to do is I want the mask to come out in these areas, but not in this area and not in the highlights. So basically we're going to dodge the lower portion of the grayscale. And so I need a low contrast mask made now. And I'm going to develop 4 minutes, about 72 degrees. And I'm going to use masking film, which I should show you what that looks like. Hang on, turn off the lights. And pull out my masking film. Okay. And again, this is in. Okay, can you see that? Yeah. Pan masking film. Now you can't buy this anymore. And once again, when Kodak announced that they were going to discontinue this, I bought a bunch, stored it. You don't have to use hand masking film. You can still do masking. Just use regular continuous tone film. You have to develop it to a low contrast, and you have to use diffusion sheets. This has built-in diffusion. It's a little more convenient, but I have diffusion sheets outside, which I will show you later. Okay. Right now, I'm going to turn off the light. I'm going to use an exposure of. I think it's I had written down my light level and all that, and I'm going back to the enlarger, make an exposure, process for 10 minutes, and look at it. Then I'll look at it with you. Okay. All right. Okay. Here we are. I just processed this test. And now masking film is actually pretty fine-grained film. And you can always process longer than 4 minutes, and I've done that. But then you will induce grain from the masking film. And the idea behind the mask is when it's in place and you print with it, you don't notice it. There's no grain from the mask. If it fits perfectly, there's no registration problems. And it just looks like you made a print from the original neg with this in place. So this is going to let the blacks come out black. It's going to dodge these areas, and this presumably is approaching the high values, and it'll let the high values come through, so you get good detail in your areas for the highlights. It's even dodging the lower midtones. So it puts a bump in the curve and lifts that area of the image that would normally be like this. It brings it up so that it's on the straight line portion of the paper curve. Don't forget, we're trying to get what we want into the density range that the paper will respond to, you know. So this is 4 seconds at 1.7 light level, which is what I had written down. And it looks enough. Let me get the original print that I made. Okay, so let's see, maybe I have to bring this up. If I hold it right here, you'll be able to see it. Okay. So this is what I want, except that I would like the blacks to be even stronger. But these are layers of fern leaves. And so this is on the very bottom where the dirt is, I guess. And so it's way out of focus, but I still want it to be separated from these layers of fern leaves that are coming up. This is closer to the density I want to print at, except obviously this is gone. So I want to keep at least this much with this much black, with the leaves about this density. So I have to print down up because I want to add that mask on an egg, and instead of using 10 seconds I might be using 15, 14, right? So all this is going to go dark. Now, so I make this, even though this is the overall exposure I used, I knew that this was way too light, and I didn't want to change the contrast of the paper. Okay, don't forget, this is a lesson. So I'm shooting these negs to teach masking. So I'm purposely doing it, and now I knew because the lighting was so flat, overcast and in the shade, that I would have to push, and I processed 20 minutes instead of 9. And even then, I'm not getting the contrast I want here. I mean, it's better than if I just process 9 minutes, but I wanted the leaves, those fern leaves that I focused on, to be not only sharp, but to have really snappy contrast. That's why I push processed. So I get this feeling of layers, where this is, you can't tell because it's such a small print. But when I make this to be at least 16 by 20, then when you're, even 3 feet from it, you'll be able to see that there's this layering of information, and your eyes should go straight to what's focused. And then you'll notice that, there's other things going on. But anyway, this is how I think when I print. So I'm going to make the main mask, and then we'll be back. Okay. Here's the mask. I just processed, exposed and processed. And let me get the print here. I don't know if you can see this, but the blacks are going to come out because it's clear. The whites that are allowed to come out because it's clear. The lower parts of these areas, you can see it's going to be dodged here. You can see it. Now, I'm not going to use 14 seconds, I can tell you right now, instead of 10. If 10 was that exposure, I'm going to be using maybe 20, quite a bit. So, the blacks will be good. Let's see. Try to, talk to you. see me. Okay, unfortunately my battery's dying, and it just died on the last session, last 2 minutes that I was filming, and I didn't notice the camera was off, and I don't have any batteries, so this is, I don't even remember, I made some extra films that were quite a bit darker, and I used it for ortho film, and it went all the way down until it looked like a positive, and that's what I'm put down now, and I removed the original transparency now. I mean, original neg is not there. So this is a positive, basically, from the original neg, and you can see the leaves that I want focused on. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to make a mask from this, a very slight mask, that way. Okay, I have to apologize because this morning when I was masking, I ran out of batteries. I didn't have an extra set, so I had to stop. But I continued masking. But anyway, I made the mask, and hang on, I get rid of this noise. Okay, so had to stop videotaping this morning, and but I continued to mask because I want to get this done. And so I switched to, okay, well, maybe I'll try to continue where I was. Was I doing this image? I think I was doing this image. This is well, anyway. So this is the original neg of the other shot that I switched to. And this is very extreme. Really dark shadows and a very bright window with a Venetian blind, and I want to see each blade of the Venetian blind, and if I print that down to see that this goes all black. So it's intentionally shot because I knew it would be a challenge, and I wanted you to see. So I had made these, okay, and I had bleached it, which I think you saw. And there's 3 of them, okay. This one's very slight. But you can see how this picture on the wall starts to stand out away from the wall. And this is the 3rd one. So now I built up better local contrast between the picture and the wall. And when I make a mask through this, then this will come out, whereas this will be held. Obviously this is going to be held, that's going to be clear. So let me get the mask. And I have to hold this gingerly because this is a final mask. So this is what I got from that. As you can see, this is reversed now because of the mask dodging. So this dark chair, I guess, that part of the chair, is clearer than this area. I don't know what that is, a jacket or whatever's on the table. So this is going to be dodged because I'm going to get rid of this and put this on top of this. Okay, so, and then right back. I had mentioned, I know this is confusing, and it's even confusing for me because you have to understand I've been masking since the late 70s. I think I discovered masking in 79 when I was making Cibachromes and R prints, type R prints from transparencies. I had to mask them in order to get the detail out. I'm going to take this. So I had made this not from this, but from another line film that I had made darker. I don't even remember that. Yeah, here it is. I made this from that. And I did not bleach this. This made that. And this is the Ilford Ortho film. So it's thicker. It's not as thin as this film. So it's softer. And when I put this down, I can now make, back on the masking film, one where it'll be dark here. It'll be clear here. And if I add that to the original, it'll be like a neutral density of this. Now, when I make this, I don't use the original anymore. And what I did was, I used this really slight one. And I put it down here. So, these areas that I want black is being dodged a little bit. It's not a part of the neutral density, if you can follow. Okay, and that produced this. Now this you can hardly see. But if you look carefully, it's allowing the Venetian blind to come through, and overall, it's a neutral density of maybe just, I would say it's less than a third of a stop. You know, it's just what I had said way in the beginning of this mask. I made that for insurance. This is, and I could make it darker, but then you overdo it and then it dodges too much, okay? So I'm going to put this and the other mask on the original now. Okay? So you can watch me do that. In the past, whenever I explain this, it's very confusing. But because, assuming you watched all the lessons up to this point, it will make more sense. I don't use this for stripping. That glass has to be really, I use this mask. I use this piece of glass with these pins. So what I do is I take the original neg, and this is emulsion down. And normally I like to take the film right off of the drying area so that it's kept clean. And then where's the mask? Yeah, this is a little confusing. Okay, now what I have to do is I have to cut this so it's a little bit smaller than this. So I'm just going to snip the edge of this on 3 sides. Obviously I'm not going to cut the holes because I need that for registration. Now watch. This is going to look different once I put this on. So you can see this is going to come out black. It's being dodged. I just need a little bit, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to print it down to get this out. And while I do that, I need to dodge this, but I don't necessarily want to dodge this, because I want good local contrast between the blacks and that deep shadow detail that I want. Okay, so it's up to me to decide where I want that shadow detail, and that's where the other masks are bleached too. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now I'm gonna get the other one. Now I actually made one darker than this, but I didn't want to do too much. Like I said, I'm more into finesse masking now. When I was younger, I used to make a really strong mask, and I overdid it in many cases. Because you do all this work and you want a huge difference. You know, you want to show off. But that's not the point anymore. The point is to try to make a print. And again, because you can't hardly see it, but it's going to do a little bit to allow me to print that window down a little bit more. And obviously, after this is put together, you have to use a glass negative carrier. And I'll show you that later. Or, yeah, I think I'm going to do it tonight. It's past midnight, but I want to do this. Okay, so now I just take this stripping tape and I overlay it on the edge. I'm getting clumsy in my old age. So when you shoot 4x5s like this, and you know you're going to mask, you have to shoot it a little loose, because you know that you're going to lose the edge due to the tape. When you strip film into a 4x5 sheet of film, like 35mm or whatnot, then the tape doesn't touch the original film. It's sitting in the center of a 4x5. It's not as much a concern. But you know, this particular picture was shot for you guys, not really for me. I wanted to shoot something that would be a good example of masking. And I came up with this. So this shot. I actually shot 3 things over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and I didn't like one of them. So I wound up only masking 2. I could show you what I did and why I don't like it. Because I got a lot of space here, so. Okay, so this tape overlaps the 2 masks and holds it to the original. And they're all in pins. And now I just take it to the edge and cut the perimeter off. And obviously there's going to be spotting on the print, because you wind up getting all this dust spots in between. You got 2 sheets of glass, you got 3 sheets of film. That gives you 10 surfaces, right, to attract dust. So my prints always require quite a bit of spotting, which is, you know, okay. I don't make 20 prints of each day. I usually make no more than 4 prints when I finally do make a print. If I like this proof I make tonight, then I'll be in here and you'll watch me make a 16x20. I usually print 16x20 or 20x24. I can go up to 24 by 30, but in order to do 24 by 30, that room, it'll work because I have that room too. Outside, I safe lights and all everywhere, so I can do that. But I have to make trays. I don't like using a tube system of process. It's too uneven. So I like to process with trays. I'd have to make a really big tray, 4 or 5 big trays, spread it all over the lab. Okay, so this is now ready to go in the larger, and I can make a test. And I can always make another mask and replace it if it's too strong or not strong enough. But it's out of focus when you look at it. But you look at it this way, it looks sharp. And the density range between this and this is still great, but the density range between this and this is a lot less. It's reduced by at least 1 stop. That mask is probably measured around 0.4, 0.45, and this probably measures 15. So 4.5 minus 15 gives you 30, which is 1 stop. So if the small proof used 10 seconds, I'll be using 20 to get the same density here as in the proof. But this is going to get more than 1 stop more because this is not being dodged, and this is going to penetrate through the emulsion and you get more detail here. I don't know how much. Now I can still burn and dodge. That doesn't go away. So that's masking. Okay. Now I'm going to take all this stuff. I go through all these films and days of work to get to this point, and I don't even know if it's going to look good. We'll find out. It's going to look different. Whether it's going to look good or not, I don't know. All right, now this was the other shot, and this is the one I was doing when the battery died this morning. So I went to Radio Shack and I bought a bunch of batteries, and also ran out of storage space on this camera, so I bought a couple of memory chips, memory cards. All right, this here, I had made, all right, yeah, that's right. I had made these, should be 3 here. 1, 2, 3. So now you can see this pattern here. If I lift this, you hardly see. Now you get good contrast in this area. When I put the mask here, this is what I got. Okay, so this is the main mask, and this is probably about, I would say it's 0.3 here. I can check on. I don't want to put it against the top. I don't want to scratch this, okay? But you've got some density here. So that has to minus that to get the density range. So this is probably less than the stop effect when you take away the film baseless fog. But you can see it's going to be blacker here. And that's because this stopped the exposure from going to this. See, if I just didn't have this here, and I just made this from that, it wouldn't be much different than going to number 2 paper, going to number 1 or 0 paper. It's just an overall flattening. This is a local contrast mask, so it's not the same thing. And you go through, as you can see, you go through a lot of trouble to make that. And you have to visualize that. You have to see. Okay, so now, another thing I did, put this hangs back up. Another thing that I did because I think this is what I was talking about when the battery died. When I shot this, actually, it's shot. Yeah, this is the top. I focused on, because the wind was blowing. It was overcast, and I was in the shade of the overcast. It was just underneath a stairwell, and I'm shooting from a ledge. Looking down, that's the bottom of the tree, where the tree trunk is underneath here. And I've got these layers of fern leaves. So you can't see it that well, but this is not sharp. And this is not sharp. This is, the only one that's sharp is really around here. So there's this, and as you can see this going out of focus, because I used f11. This is 135 millimeter lens on a 4x5. This was shot with my father's old Graflex, which I showed in the beginning of. And that was shot with my Zone 6 wooden camera. That was better, that's sharper, because I could swing and tilt and stuff on that. This one has very limited swinging and tilt. And anyway, so you've got these layers of leaves, and things are not as sharp. Plus, you got the wind blowing. So I had to wait until the wind was not blowing, what I focused on, and then I shot. I was using 30th of a second. So when I look at this closely, I can really see the fall off. I don't like little, that's another thing, I don't like little prints. I don't like little 8x10, even 11x14 black and whites, because you have to be 6 inches from the print to see it. I'll just sit on my sofa and still see print. That's why I actually like 20x24, so I can still see it from across the room. But this picture is not going to work unless I get that sense of depth through the drop off and focus. And so, and another thing was, it was such low contrast lighting that I shot this with and processed normal +2. I processed it for 20 minutes, and it's still not contrasty enough. You can, you can't see, but on the proof that I made, I could see. Let me get the proof. I made this. That's as dark as, I want as much separation here as possible. I want that, even though it's out of focus, I wanted to see the difference between the black and a deep shadow detail there. But this is way too light. Even this isn't dark enough but I'm already losing the sparkle that I tried to get by processing for 20 minutes. So what I did was, from this original neg, aside from making these, I also made another shot. I also made this, and you can see I opaqued those high values that I didn't want, and when I put it together, and I used black paper here. That's what I did, and again, I don't use the original now. I'm just using this. I make this. I made this. I don't know if you can see. It's very strong, but when I add this, it'll add a little bit of white. Now I'm masking the whites. I'm not masking the shadow area. I'm masking the high value area to lighten it. And this might be too strong. I don't know. If it's too strong, I can always use the farmer's reducer and soak it and take away some of the density. Or I can make another one. But this is my guess. That's why I don't know if this is going to work. Because when I do stuff like this, this is what I do here is based on what I see, what I want to see on the print. So how I mask is always different. Like I said, you make your first stage mask to the point where the next, where it's clear on the first stage mask is where the dodging is going to happen. So here I went all the way down until now this is going to be lightened. And normally you want to lighten that high up, but for this particular shot, that's what I want. And that's why I shot it, because I knew this was a shot for a lesson. It's not necessarily what I would normally shoot. It's because even though I told you about masking, I didn't tell you about specialized masking, I guess. Most of the time you're masking in lift zone 2, away from zone 0. So you get good local contrast in shadows. That's typical, but this is not. This is to improve the lighting that was there, Now, when I first started doing stuff like this, I thought I was very clever. But in fact, it's not new. In graphics arts printing, in offset printing, people have been doing this for years. A dual tone print, when you're printing a dual tone print with black ink, you make a screen which makes a plate which picks up ink and puts it on these little drops of black ink. Where these drops are close together, it gets black. Where it's spread out, it goes grayer until it reaches white. So you have this grayscale you can print with ink, and that's what offset printing is. Well, a duotone is when you make a separate plate for just a certain area and you add another layer of ink. You can change the color, or you use the same color, then you can make the blacks blacker. That's what this is. Except in this case, I'm making the whites whiter. So it's not new. It might be new in the dark. I don't know. John Sexton told me that he's been teaching masking, film masking, for many years when he first heard about what I was doing. And he says that there's quite a few people out there doing film masking. So, but I don't know if they do it exactly like this, but whatever. So this is not new. It's just how I do it. And it came directly from doing work for others. If I wasn't doing work for others, I may never have come up with this, because of the demands placed on me and the competition, trying to, be the best out there, the best photo lab. You come up with things, and everyone's out there trade secrets. Well, this was mine. And so I'm sharing with you. And okay, so I'm going to put this together, okay? Let me hang this back up. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. Give me the original. Sometimes when I'm spotting a 20 by 24 print, it'll take me a whole hour to spot one print. And, so when you make 4 prints, that could be 4 hours. why I'm not crazy about making 100 prints. Okay, so what I'm going to do is cut this. Same thing, cut the edge. You know, I started videotaping this summer, and now, last summer, and now it's January of the next year. I started posting it toward the end of the summer, and getting a few views, but not that many. And you know, the most interesting thing is I'm not getting any questions. No one's asking me. I mean, I'm getting a couple of questions, but the questions are not, doesn't pertain to masking. So, okay, so now it looks different. So obviously it's going to be a different print, but whether it's better or not, we'll see. And YouTube is pretty good because they give you data. They call it analytics. And my average viewing is a little less than 5 minutes. That's taking all the minutes of all my videos, dividing it by how many views, and so some people might be watching it from beginning to end, but most people, you know, it's telling me people are turning me off after 5 minutes. And most of my videos are like half an hour. So it's not too promising. But what the heck? This is what I know. So this is what I do. Okay. I should turn off the camera because this could be boring watching me do this. I have to look to make sure there's no little hairs. And you know, there are masks that I made many years ago that I taped together, and they're still taped together. And once in a while I'll take it out and I'll make another print. So it's good to use permanent tape. Tape that's not going to get all gummy and, you know. I know I'm going to crop this area, so I'm not going to worry about it. Alright, voila. This is my favorite part of masking. When I get to the very end, and I'm going to make a small proof and compare it to the one I made that's not masked. And sometimes it's heartbreaking because you actually get a worse print than if you had not masked. I hate to admit that, but that does happen. Razor blade or dull. Alright, so I'm going to turn off the camera. And, no, I should do one more thing. I should let you watch me do this, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with glass negative carriers. But you have to have a glass negative carrier. Another thing you have to have is you have to have an enlarger that's aligned. And the best alignment that I've ever seen is a Zig Align. The Zig Align is a system of aligning the baseboard, the lens stage, the negative stage up with one another. And it works off a premise of these LEDs with mirrors. So you've got like 4 LEDs that are implanted into a piece of glass or a mirror, and there's a mirror on the baseboard, and it reflects back and forth. So that those 4 LEDs cross if it's aligned. If it's not aligned, you can see it bending. So Richard Polotowski, who was very good friends with Mr. Ziegler, who invented the system, is an expert in alignment. And so Richard aligns all my enlargers. And that's ensures that when you focus in the center, the corners are also sharp. And most enlargers are not aligned correctly. I'm just making a proof. So this is a glass carrier, anti-Newton ring glass and regular glass. Richard fitted this with anti-Newton. This is anti-Newton ring glass. This is also anti-Newton ring glass. So I'll clean it before I make the enlargements, but right now I'm just going to make proofs. So this goes emulsion down. And this piece of glass goes on here. And there you have it. And I'll put this in larger. I'll bring the chemicals out, and we're going to make a small proof. Okay? Okay, the moment of truth. My first test. And this is 16 seconds, 20 seconds, and 24 seconds. I make it about the same size. So I have my exposure from before. So I know that, I don't have to start from scratch. This was 11 seconds. So I knew that I was going to need more than 11 seconds. And let's see. As you can see, okay, yeah, now this leaf here is quite a bit more sparkly. Yeah. And this, although this got 24 seconds, it's going to be lighter because, I think 24 is too much and 20 might be. But look at back there. Here, you don't see hardly anything, but here, now you can see that. So now, if I look at it this close, I see a lot more. So it looks like, okay, it looks like let me just try 20 seconds. Maybe 21 seconds. Okay? And I'll make a full print. Okay. I think I'm getting a reflection here. Yeah, this reflection here. I have to turn again. This is a little, it's probably about 4 by 6. Let's try to zoom in. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, this is a straight print. And yeah, it's not perfect. Is it 80%? Yeah. Where I want to be? I don't know. Obviously, I can, this is a straight print, so when I make the print, final print, I can dodge and burn and whatever. But given, this as a starting point, this is what I wanted. So I got that. But I wanted the leaves darker and not lose sparkle. I've got a bit of that. I didn't want this I know I'm going to burn that down. And there you go. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough of a difference to have kept me masking all these years. And when someone looks at this, they don't know how much work it went into doing it. It's whether or not it moves them, you know. And anyway, it turned out pretty much like I thought it would. It's not a great shot, but again, I did this so that you guys would have a good understanding of what I was shooting for and how I do it. And now I'm going to switch to the other neg, okay? Now there's dry down, so when it dries, it gets a little darker depending on which paper you're using. But so tomorrow morning when it's dry, I'll take a good look at it and then decide at that point how I want to print the final blow up. And then after I'm done, I put the negative away and I move on to something else. Very seldom do I, you know, bring out an old neg and print it again. But I've had, you know, certain things I liked, but obviously most of the negs I shot I do not mask because it's not worth it. You have to really like your picture if you can do all this work. So, okay, I'll be back with the next one. Okay. Here's just this one. This is 12 seconds. 12, 16. Did I use 3 or 4? Anyway, 12, 15, 18, I think. And with 18 seconds, I can see all the slits. So you can't see it, but this, the Venetian blind, you can see without burning. I can see the sunlight coming in between those Venetian blinds, so there's good separation there. Down here, let's see, let me get the old one. Yeah, this one you don't even see the separation and it's already black. Actually, this is pretty close. But easily, obviously I can use 12 seconds and burn, right? I like the main thing in this picture, the reason why I shot it, because it was just, I was walking by the dining room and I saw the shadow moving. And I thought, well, if I use a slow shutter speed, I can catch that movement. It was very harsh. I said, oh, this would be a good test to test the masking and can demonstrate masking. So I shot a number of these different exposures, and this one had the best movement that I liked. So I like the tone of that movement that better than this. This is too dark. The mask went in there and lightened that, so you actually see more of a movement there. So that's actually very nice. Maybe I'll dodge and use the longer exposure. I don't know. Let's make the whole image, and maybe I'll just use the middle exposure. Okay, I'll be back. All right, here it is. So the middle exposure, yeah, I can still see the sunlight coming in between the Venetian blinds in the lightest area there. You can see very clearly here. Yeah, I can easily use this exposure, dodge this, and burn that a little bit. And again, I didn't want this really light, so you can't, you know, I can't overdo that dodging. I did make one like this with another neg which didn't have as much movement, Very heavy mask on this one. Double masked. Same as this, but the second mask was really very strong. And I didn't like this at all because it just lost the atmosphere. So, you know, I knew I didn't want to lighten it that much. But you can. And still see all that. Masking is very flexible. So I had done this and reshot because I didn't like the cropping either. Anyway, but this is before and after. Before, after. The lights overhead are clearer. You can actually see the separation between the ceiling and the hanging light, between the picture frame and the wall. It's just, I mean, it's a little bit dark. I have to look at the dry down. Tomorrow morning when it dries down, it'll be a little bit darker, so it'll give me a better idea. I do want this a little darker, but it's not that much. I mean, the idea behind masking is you don't know there's a mask on an egg. I mean, just, you know. But I do want to see separation between the sunlight coming through and that Venetian blind. You see it all here easily enough, but that's the brightest area. And you don't see it at all here, but here you do. So it's just about right. And I do like the fact that that moving shadow is lighter than this. Because movement and stillness is something that I've always liked in a photograph. I got into that, and actually the print that's on my wall, it's been on the wall for over 35 years. The title that I gave it in my head was Stillness and Movement Never Ending. Yeah. And it's just been cool. So after all that, that's the difference. And it's not a huge difference, but it's enough of a difference to have had me masking these last 35 years. And you can make huge differences, but I'm more into a finesse masking now. I have nothing to prove. I mean, I don't. True story. Okay. When I worked for my father, this is probably 1984. I think I left in 85. There was a contract they were going for. It's for a drug company. And you know, they were going to put pictures up in the jewelry department in this drugstore, and they're going to start selling jewelry. And they were interested in hiring a lab to do a contract, and so they sent out. They had their photographer shoot some diamond rings or something, and shot identical exposures. Gave everyone the same transparency, and we were up against 3 or 4 of the labs, and he gave me this thing. He says that everyone's supposed to make a 30 by 40. It might have been a Duratrans, I'm not sure what it was. And I looked at the transparency, and it was so crummy. It was so badly lit, so badly shot. I looked at it, I said, what am I going to do with this? I mean, so normally you want to, like I said, you want to maintain the highlight detail and pull out the shadows, but it was flat. It was already flat, so I said, okay, I'm going to increase contrast. So I darkened the shadows rather than lighten it. And I looked at the final print, I thought, it still doesn't look good. I'm too busy. I have all this work coming down the pike, so I let it go. And then about a month later, we got the contract. And I remember Eleanor told me that when they looked at the prints, they said they all looked about the same, but for some reason the one that you guys applied was different. And even though you weren't the cheapest, we had to go with you. So that was a situation where I increased the contrast rather than reduce it, because normally masking is to reduce the contrast. So masking is very flexible, and it's not a little bit more work, it's a lot more work, and it doesn't work unless you know what you want. Not that you're going to get it, but at least you have a chance to get it if you know what you want and you mask for it. The mask is not going to be the same for every transparency or negative. Back in those days, everyone was masking transparencies. I was masking negatives as well as transparencies. Then you make a huge difference. You can mask the transparency, make an inner negative, mask the inner negative, and it's, you know, especially doing tricolor masking. Anyway, okay, so at this point, this completes the masking session. I think this is part C of masking. And it won't make sense unless you've watched lesson 1 and lesson 2. Or if you're experienced and you already know how to do much of what I explained, and you don't need lesson 1 or 2, you know. But most really good printers, people have been printing for years and years and years, and you know, this is a problem with us printers. You work so hard on a print that inevitably you think you're the best. You know, people use, you know, like the farmer's reducer I showed you for bleaching. They'll put on the cotton, they'll go up to the highlights, and they'll start washing some of the detail away to get the whites to be very, you know, Eugene Smith did that a lot. Throw it back in the fixer and you have to stop it right. And that's a trick. They'll use concentrate developer in 100 degree concentrate developer, put a cotton swab on it, and it'll increases development in certain areas of the print. And that's a trick. And so we all have our tricks. Emmett Gowen made contour maps. He had an enlarger that had, where you put the negative, he had stages above that you could put filters, you know, for filtered printing. And instead of putting filter there, he used Rubylith, which is a red film that you can cut with a blade, and you can cut and peel off the red area. Well, red obviously blocks red light to the print, so it acts like a safe light. So you only allow light to go through the clear area of the Rubylith, and he would basically be masking, except it wasn't a photographic mask, it was a manually cut mask. And he put that above the negative station. There was a documentary of him showing how he did this, and a lot of stuff he shot was 8x10 negs, so he could cut around the, and then because it was above the negative, it was diffused, it was out of focus, so you couldn't see the edge very clearly. And he used that to modify the light reaching the paper. We all have our tricks, and this was mine. But the problem with tricks like this is you think you know everything, and you don't. You know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. A lot of the old photographers are convinced they're the best, and you know, I remember when I was told to learn dye transfer from Catine, I already knew masking. I thought I was the best. I was, you know, cocky. And my first day with Catine, I was kind of testing him. asking him certain questions. But by the second day, I knew that guy knew what he was talking about. I said, this guy knows something. I'm just going to listen to him, do whatever he says. And I'm glad I did, because he graduated from, in physics, and brilliant guy, and he has that scientific mind, and really good lab habits. So Katine taught me a lot, and I realized the main thing I learned from Katine was the importance of the grayscale, which is what started this whole thing. If you remember the first lesson, I brought you in darkroom. I said, this is 21 silver sub tablet. This is what. Now, if you think about density range, what I'm doing here is I'm modifying the density range of the negative that I got, so that the paper will see it in the way that I want it to see it. So I get detail where I want. So I mask accordingly. And when I started this project, I was going to teach, and I thought, well, maybe I'll put it in Demi and I'll charge a little bit for it. But then I said, I don't want receiving this film from people. I have to read it on desktop, send it back to them. I don't want to do that. I just put it on YouTube, put it out there, and everyone will have it, and they can run with it. Now, if you're young enough and you're not cocky, try it. This technique, it's good to know, but you have to do it. And the only real expense, oh, one thing, diffusion sheets. Let me get that. Kodak diffusion sheet. And this happens to be very large diffusion sheet, so you can, obviously you only need a little. So you put this in between your original and the receiving emulsion, and you don't need masking film. You can use this. You can use 2 sheets, 3 sheets. You get a lot. I used to use this for soft edge masking when I dropped in products into different backgrounds, and you couldn't tell that it was dropped in. I made an 8x10 neg out and combined 4 or 5 originals, and I made all these films that were soft edged that fit perfectly and it blended. This is what I use. So you don't need masking film. You just need diffusion. It's matte on one side and glossy on the other. And sometimes I'll use 4 sheets. I don't do composite printing, composite negs anymore, but I do use this in masking. Like when I'm going from a line film to the final mask, it's too sharp. I had mentioned that once. Line film is really sharp, so I'll use 3 sheets of this in between, and it'll soften that edge. And as you can see, well, you can't see that well, when you combine it, you can't tell there's a mask. There's no edge if you do it correctly. But with diffusion sheets, you don't need masking film, okay? Problem now is film is expensive, really expensive. So I'm glad I have the films that I do have. This paper, I mean, I make tests like this because this is so expensive. This is double weight, multi-grade Ilford. It's beautiful paper, but it's really expensive. So I used to make 8x10 proofs, but now I just make them half that size so I could get more. And they're just to be filed with an egg anyway. So you have to try it. Any decent machine shop can make you a registration system. Better yet, go on eBay and look for. I mean, there are graphic arts houses closed all over the world. They don't need these punches and these pins, and you should be able to pick it up for a song. I bought mine in the 80s and lasted all these years. You know, I had registration systems going up to 16x20, and now I don't. You know, I hardly. You know, I don't even shoot 8x10 anymore because I don't have a darkroom to put my 10x10 and larger. So everything's 4x5 now. But if I ever get my 8x10 up and larger up, which I would require like a 16-foot ceiling. I had an enlarger that went 35 feet in the air. We printed, the largest print we made was, I think Richard told me it was over 30 feet long. We had it in a lunchroom. Anyway, one of you guys out there should try this. And, but you have to enjoy the process. You know, getting to this point is fun, but along the way it's very exciting. You know, I wonder how this is going to work. And then if I switch this, you know, when I made masks before, people always scratch their heads and say, "What's he doing?" Because I made, you know, when you make contact negatives, let's say I had an 8x10 original or 4x5 original transparency, and I made a contact internate. So the negative is the same size as the transparency. I could make masks from the transparency and put it on the negative. It'll fit, right? So you're able to do all kinds of things if you think in terms of how masking will affect the next stage. That's the key, is to what's going to happen if what happens if I put this on the original? What if I don't use the original? What if I make another one, and then I make, right? So you can flip-flop back and forth, and I used to drop backgrounds like that. Photographers would shoot something, and they would use a black plexiglass, reflect the flash off to the black so it would photograph white. Where it didn't reflect, it'd be solid black of the plexiglass. They could never get it large enough, and they'd give it to me and I'd mask it to clean it up so that it was pure white, because they couldn't get it in the shot. And I did that with masking. So, well, I don't do that anymore, but like I said, because of the demands placed on me, it forced me to come up with solutions. And because I was good at masking, I used masking as my tool towards the solution, and as a result, it made me think differently than most printers, I guess. I spent many hours in the darkroom and many years in the business, and I guess I should mention that when you do this work, it shouldn't be work. It should be really enjoyable and self-fulfilling. Now, of course, I'm retired, and I just recently decided to collect Social Security money at 65 rather than work anymore, because I don't want to sell anything. I don't want to sell any prints. People see my stuff and they go, "Wow, that looks really great. How much is it?" Well, 20 by 24 is $1,500. They go, "What?" Well, it's going to last a few hundred years. And they go away. Sometimes they come back. They ask me how much. They just want you to lower the price. And I think after working so long in the business, I just said, I don't want to sell anything. And one thing that I did was it allowed me to think of what I wanted to work on now without worrying about whether it was going to be marketable. I just want to do stuff that I want to do. If it looks good to me, and I say it's 80% good enough, then I'll do it and put it out there. If it's 75%, maybe I'll mask it again and get it, the quality up to where it's, you know, something like Louis Armstrong, I hit 100%, but that took me years to get to exactly what I want, right? So that's got to be self-fulfilling, because it could break you if you rely on the approval of others. So another true story. I got a job. A lot of clients were like this, but this was the worst client I ever had, and I did work for them for years. They were big. They had a lot of work. But the problem is they think they can just because they're giving you a $10,000 job, they think they can jerk you around, you know. And anyway, they sent me a black and white print, 16 by 20 black and white print, solid blacks, well printed, but it was not a reproduction print. It was a fine art print, something you might hang in the gallery. So consequently, the shadow detail was not light. It was there, but it wasn't light. Ansel Adams explained in his book, The Print, that when you're making prints for reproduction, you don't make a fine art print. You make it lighter, because he knows that when you copy it, you're going to gain contrast. So I remember when I started printing in the business, we would sell reproduction prints, and everyone killed themselves to make the best print. That's what they thought. That's not what a reproduction print is. A reproduction print is made for reproductions. It's not made for display. It's made for reproduction. So you make it a little bit soft. So when you copy it, you gain back the contrast. When you print it, it looks more like an original print. Well, nobody knows this because no how many people read the print by Ansel Adams. So I'm getting these prints that are so dense, and I have to copy it, and I have to drop in type, and then I have to make this bus shelter print, which is 47 by 68. They only want 10 prints or something. So I have to make a transparency of the original print, and then I make it 8 by 10. And when I print it on the internet, I have to block out the area where the type is going to be, and come back in and drop in type. And so I do the job. I make a proof for them, and they said there's not enough detail. We want, you know, they're pointing to the original. And I'm thinking, I need the original. I mean, and they say you can't. It's impossible to get the originals shot by Annie Leibovitz or someone in New York. They won't release it. So I go back, because I have a process camera. You know, I'm able to shoot 24 by 30 inch negatives. This process camera. I told Richard, have the guys shoot 2 negs. Shoot it to the final size. We're not going to go the route of making a transparency and we'll drop in the type another way. But make me 2 negs. One neg, give me a perfectly exposed neg, and the second neg, give it 3 stops more. So they did. But I told Richard, punch them. Punch it, put the pins on the back of the camera so those 2 negs register. So he did it. One neg is useless because it's so dark, but it had a lot of shadow detail. I used that neg to make my first stage mask, so that the blacks had good separation from because the print didn't have good separation from the shadow detail to the black because they printed it so dark. But I solved that by shooting an overexposed neg. I used that neg just for the first stage mask, and of course I bleached it like I showed you. And I probably only needed 2 sheets. I didn't need 3 because I had really good contrast there. Then when I made the main mask, I switched to the good neg, which was correctly exposed, but it fit because it was pin registered to the other neg. And then I made my mask, and I had to drop in the type. I had to shoot the neg and leave room for the type, and put a line film there that blocked it and gave me white type against a black background or something. Anyway. So we made another print, and it was vastly better. But it didn't look like the original, but it was vastly better. Delivered to them. They said they were shocked because it was so much different. They said, you brought out too much detail. And I said, well, if you want a better print than that, I need the original. I need the original neg. So they put a hold on the job, and they finally got me the original neg, and it was a Polaroid neg. It was a 4x5 Polaroid neg, which was a little bit larger. It was 4x5 size, but it was on film that's larger. So I stripped it in to a sheet of 8x10. Like I for masking. And I took the original neg and I masked it the way that I masked these. And to the 8x10 room, I had a loft in the 8x in this particular 8x10 room. I had a loft, and you could stand. I had one person up on the loft, putting the masked neg in there, another person down below with a 48 by 68 inch. So he had 50-inch plus line neg rolled out on pins, print through the window. We printed the image, with the image still down. They laid down another piece of line film across the bottom. The person upstairs had to take the glass carrier out, which was pin registered. They put another another glass carrier in there, project light, and burn the bottom while the top image was blocked. Had to do that 10 times. And the print we produced looked better than the print they gave me to copy, obviously, because it was masked. Now I'm printing on colored paper because, and we have these processes. So we deliver it, 10 prints. They didn't say thank you. They paid the bill. No news. Well, they say no news is good news. So job's done. I did this job 3 times. Okay, it was $1,500 or something like that. I don't remember. It wasn't $2,000. A month and a half later, they call me and they say, "Oh, 10 more bus shelter spaces opened up. We want 10 more." And I said, "I already tore off all the masks." Now they don't know what I'm talking about. I have to start from scratch. All that, because once you remove the mask, it's not registered anymore. Because I had to tear it off and give them back the original, right? And I said, "All right, I have to charge you an extra $1,000 for the setup." They said, "No, we want to pay what we paid before." I said, I can't, especially if you want it by Monday. This is Friday. They wanted it by Monday. So I said, so I hung up. A week later, they called me and they said, "Tim, I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at this print. We gave them exactly what we gave you. One corner is green, the other corner is yellow. I don't know what's going on in the middle. It's kind of pink." And I'm saying, "You sent that job to somewhere else?" I said, "You have no idea what I had to jump through hoops to get that those prints for you. No one's gonna do what I did." And I said, "I'll tell you what. If you still want it, I'll do it. I'll charge you $1,000 more than I paid. Than you paid for the first set." They said, "No, we don't want to pay any more." And this is a company that's got so much money. A lousy $1,000. And I said, "Well, I can't help you." And then eventually I just let them go. Because they were just jerking me around, and I just didn't. And after that, I started to cut back on my clients, and I only wanted to do work for certain clients. 2 or 3 years later, one of the women who worked in that department had moved to another headquarters, and she called us. She says, "Tim, I'm so glad to be out of that office. Is so bad. They treat the vendors so bad. And you know what? They could never find anyone as good as you, but they wouldn't call you back." And I just she put in for a transfer, and she goes, "I'm so sorry they treated you like that." And I said, "Well, thanks for calling. That's nice to hear." Even though they knew I was giving them the best work, and they're supposed to be so important that they would only accept the best work, they wouldn't pay for it. It was more important for them to feel a certain amount of control, which proved to them that they were the best at whatever you know, the store that, you know, they owned. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because if I continued to do work for them and let them, that would have meant that I needed their approval to know that what I did was worth it and good. And you can't. You have to know that what you're doing is meaningful and worthwhile. And after all those years in the business of making prints for marketing purposes, I walked away finally because the building I was in, thank God, is being torn down to be made into condominiums. And I'm going to have to write an email tomorrow to my old landlord to thank him because it was time to get out. Retire. So if you're going to do this kind of work, you have to know in your heart that what you're doing is meaningful and you do it for yourself, because no one's going to know what goes into a print. I mean, you can charge them more, but that doesn't mean that they really appreciate the work you've done. They're probably just collectors. You know, they'll pay me $1,500 for a 20 by 24 if I was famous, and my print's going to be worth double that in 3 years. But I want people to look at the print and feel something, make a difference. Like I said, I mean, if you have a piece of artwork, it doesn't matter if it's sculpture or painting or a photograph, and it's on your wall, and every day when you look at it, it makes you feel good. What's that worth? Is that worth $1,500 or $10,000? I mean, but I'm talking about sincerely feeling good, not feeling good because it was a good investment. And the guy down the block wishes he had that print because it's hard to get. That's meaningless. So I hope someone out there is going to try this, because I hate to see it die. You know, film photography. It's a lot of fun. It's very exciting. And you know, when I walked by this particular window and I saw this, I felt something. I saw the thing move. It was moving quite a bit. The shadows moving, and I felt something. I thought, man, if I could capture that feeling in a photograph, that'd be cool. So that's why I started shooting it. And I don't know. We'll see when I blow it up. So this is the last video lesson on masking. Then the next one I do is going to be the last one. I mean, I can always add other stuff if I have something to say. But that's it. That's pretty much everything I know. Not everything, but I covered all the bases. If you're curious and you watch my videos from beginning to end again and again, if something doesn't make sense, just email me. If you get it, it's everything I know. The only video I'm going to add now is when I blow these up, and you'll see how I do archival printing. And you know, that's, you can't really see me burning and dodging because this camera doesn't work too well in the dark. Yeah, I bought this camera for music. It's got a good microphone, and I shoot my friends playing guitar. And you know, I got onto YouTube in about 2003 because I had a TV show years before that on public access, and I had on the San Francisco Guitar Society, and I did all these videos. And when YouTube came along, I converted them digital. I started downloading. So I love YouTube because the stuff that I posted years and years and years is still there. And so I'm assuming this is going to still be there for many years, and people can take what I'm teaching and run with it, hopefully. So that's it for masking. The next video will be me blowing up these two negatives, maybe something else. I don't mask everything. There are some things that I just print because I don't need masks. So it's not like I mask everything. If I do mask something, it better be a decent picture because it's a lot of work. Okay? So thanks for watching this whole thing through. And next time I see you, I'll be making 16 by 20 or 20 by 24s. Okay? All right.